Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes, the director of Freed Indeed Ministries, and today I want to continue our series on the Royal Passion Bearers of Russia, Tsar Nicholas and his family, and we're going through this work by their life and service by the St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood. It's a really excellent book that really does a very good treatment on the Romanov family from the perspective of the Orthodox faith. And then the last portion of the book is actually um the Vespers, the Great Vespers service for the Royal Passion Bearers, and I think if I'm not mistaken, it even has, yes, it has the Matins service as well for their feast day, January 17th. So, really, oh, and even the Divine Liturgy itself. So it has all of the readings, everything, and the litanies, the antiphons, everything. So really awesome resource. But it's very helpful to examine the history of the Royal Passion Bearers. Um, this week we're going to talk about something that's very controversial, and I want to preface this by saying that saints can make mistakes. So you don't have to agree with every decision that Tsar Nicholas made that we're going to be talking about today. But it's good to understand the motives behind them, and it's good to see how his Christian faith prompted him and how he understood these things and how the church understands these things, whether we agree with his decisions in every way or not. Obviously, nobody's perfect, even the saints, and all of us make decisions, some of which are good decisions and some of which are not. And this is a particular example that's very difficult for me as someone who is a great lover of Russian history, but is also a great lover of Japanese history and culture. I admit that this is a very difficult point in the life of Tsar Nicholas, and it's one that I myself have had to wrestle with. So I understand if you might not agree with all of his decisions, but it's still, whether you agree or disagree with his decisions on this, it's still good to honor his saintly legacy and honor the aspects of this that were um that were in the right. So let's just go through it. This isn't a super long section, and then next time we do one of these, we can talk about the royal family. That's a much lengthier section, um, and a much more helpful and more worthy of imitation section. But even here, whether you agree or disagree with the decisions that he made, it's good to examine the aspects that are worthy of imitation. I don't agree with Socrates on many things because he was a pagan, but throughout church history, it has been very common for church fathers and other figures to note aspects of the life of Socrates that were worthy of imitation. So, um, and so if we can treat a pagan with that much respect, then surely we can treat a saint with that much respect. So let's examine section 5, the Russo-Japanese War and the Revolution of 1905 to 1906. In 1898, China and Russia negotiated an agreement whereby Russia would lease the Chinese city of Port Arthur, now Lushun Port, thus giving Russia its sole warm water port. Russia hastened to finish building the Trans-Siberian Railroad to facilitate the movement of goods. Japan, fearful of Russian influence in the area, attacked Russia in February of 1904. The war did not go well for Russia, and the Japanese Navy eventually destroyed the Russian fleet. So, first off, whether you agree with war or not, I think it's fair to point out that the Japanese Navy was acting as the aggressor in the Russo-Japanese War, and so Tsar Nicholas's participation in the war um, is not some kind of, aggressive military thing. So that's an important point. During the second half of the war, great civil unrest broke out within the empire. For decades, Western ideologies, especially socialism, had been gaining an influence over the educated classes and even some parts of the aristocracy in Russia. Universities, especially, were becoming centers of radical philosophy, and manifestations of anti-Christian thought were continually increasing in the world's largest Christian nation. Also, at this time, agrarian reforms were needed, and the rapid rise of industrialization was creating new classes in society that were easily exploited by revolutionaries. The Russian defeat at the hands of the Japanese added fuel to the fire. Assassinations of government officials who were supportive of the monarchy and its policies were becoming commonplace. The revolution of 1905 to 1906 was a warning to Russians that if they did not return to Christ as a nation, and if they continued to work and fight against their anointed ruler, they could lose God's blessing. As St. John of Kronstadt said in 1905, our Tsar is a man of righteous and pious life. God has sent him a heavy cross of suffering as to his chosen one and beloved child, as is said by the seer of the mysteries of God's judgment. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Apocalypse 3:19. If the Russian people do not have repentance, the end of the world will be near. God will take the pious Tsar from them and will send a scourge in the persons of impious rulers. Self-proclaimed rulers will inundate the whole land with blood and tears. It is to the great credit of Tsar Nicholas that he was able to keep this from happening for more than 10 years. So that is, um, I mean, St. John of Kronstadt was so spot on in this assessment that what the Bolsheviks were offering was nothing but blood and tears. I love this quote. If the Russian people do not have repentance, then the end of the world will be near. God will take the pious Tsar from them and send a scourge in the person of impious, cruel, self-proclaimed rulers. Impious, cruel, self-proclaimed rulers. This is what we see in countries that have thrown off the God-ordained monarchy. We see that monarchy is always replaced by impious, self-willed, cruel, self-proclaimed rulers. What is democracy but a bunch of self-proclaimed rulers who have zero um, actual qualifications to be rulers and are simply rulers because they can convince a bunch of people to vote for them? It's absurd. So these self-proclaimed rulers, cruel and impious self-proclaimed rulers, bring nothing but blood and tears. It's true in every country where this happens, but was especially true in Russia, where they had to go through the Soviet Union times. A great insight into Tsar Nicholas's character can be gained from the following incident, which occurred during one of the most violent moments of the aforementioned revolution. At the imperial residence of Peterhof, near the naval base at Kronstadt, which was under siege by insurrectionists, artillery shellings could be heard. Nicholas's foreign minister Alexander Izvolsky was giving a report to the Tsar at the time and later recalled the following. He listened attentively and, as was his habit, asked questions now and then, showing his interest in the smallest details of my report. Glance as I would in his direction, I could not detect the slightest trace of emotion in his countenance, although he knew well that it was his crown that was at stake. And at that moment, only a few leagues away, when my report was finished, the Emperor remained a few moments looking calmly out the open window at the line of the horizon. For my part, I was oppressed by a profound emotion, and I could not refrain, even at the risk of infringing the rules of etiquette, from my expressing surprise at seeing him so unmoved. The Emperor did not apparently resent my observation, for he turned to me with a look which has so often been described as one of extraordinary gentleness, and replied in these few words, deeply engraven in my memory: "If you see me so calm, it is because I have the firm and absolute conviction that the fate of Russia and my own fate and that of my family is in the hands of God, who has placed me where I am. Whatever happens, I will bow to his will, conscious of never having had a thought other than that of serving the country he has confided to me." So we see Tsar Nicholas's righteous character. We see how Tsar Nicholas reveals to us what a righteous and, once again, what a righteous and pious king looks like, what a righteous and pious person looks like. Whatever God has entrusted to us, God does not entrust to us these things for us to then have anxiety over them. God entrusts us these things for us to bless him and for us to work our best, but to trust God with the outcome. As a result of the revolution of 1905 to 1906, the Tsar allowed the formation of an elected assembly known as the Duma. That was a terrible mistake. It should never have happened. And it was just a unfortunate capitulation that resulted in nothing but sadness. However, this body was so overrun by people of a revolutionary frame of mind that Nicholas was compelled to disband it. The second Duma was even worse, and likewise dissolved. The third Duma was convened under the new Prime Minister Pyotr Stolpin, one of the greatest statesmen produced by Russia, who served from 1906 to 1911. He was at last able to quell the mutinies and assassinations that were plaguing the country, and enacted agrarian reforms that put the Russian economy on a truly solid footing. Within a short time, Russia began a period of growing prosperity, especially in the area of agriculture. The rate of economic and educational growth became comparable to that of other European countries, and a prolonged period of peaceful development would have enabled Russia to realize its full potential. Tragically, Stolypin himself was assassinated by a revolutionary, cutting short his invaluable contribution. So we'll stop there. But we can see that as Tsar Nicholas caved in and allowed people to have elected officials, he ensured that people had the best possible elected officials, the best possible prime minister, and then even then, the Bolsheviks eventually took even that away from the people because they didn't actually care about elections or any of the other things that they were claiming to care about. They just wanted to destroy the righteous authority, and replace him with a uh, vagabond. Um, so, like I said, next time that we approach this series, we will be approaching uh, the the royal family. Thank you very much for watching. Please do share this with your friends so that they too can be freed indeed.